Great. Thanks, Harvey. Good morning, everybody. Hope everyone can hear me okay. My name is Aaron Campbell. I am here to talk to you guys today about my science journey. I hope all of you that are attending today love science just as much as I do. And if not, maybe by the end of this presentation, will. So today, I'm going to show you a little bit about my experiences as a scientist throughout my life, some of my jobs, and some of my lessons learned. We're going to talk a little bit about the future of science and what it means to be a scientist, and why it's so cool and amazing to be a scientist. So a little bit about my background. Right now, currently, I am a nature educator at Jackson Bottom Wetlands Preserve in Hillsborough, just south of downtown. If anyone's ever been there before, I highly recommend checking it out. It's really close by, about 5 miles of walkable trails. And it's a really great place to see some cool wildlife, very close to town. I have done 4 seasons as a biological wildlife tech. We can get into that a little bit more, and I'll show you guys some pictures and share a little bit about those experiences as well. Currently, I am also the owner and operator of Nature Nerd Expeditions. On my days off, I provide free nature walks and education in my neighborhood in Southeast Portland. And then personally, through my studies, some of the biofield techs jobs that I've worked for multiple universities, including Central Washington University, Colorado State University, University of Montana, as well as my alma mater, the Evergreen State College up in Olympia, Washington. It's where I have a BS in zoology from. Notice the quotations, ornithology. Evergreen doesn't give out grades, quote unquote. So every degree you get there is an emphasis in something. So my emphasis was ornithology. Adrian, can you guess what ornithology is? No, it's the study of birds. So what's really cool about scientists is that often, or just sciences in general, if you've ever heard of an ology or an onomy, that's probably a science, whether it's cosmetology or cosmology. Almost everything with an ology or omni has something to do with science. And then as a kid, I loved dinosaurs. I hope most of you did too when you were younger. And that's kind of what led me into studying birds. I've been keeping a bird list since 3rd grade and currently have about 600-700 species in my life list. I saw a life for this weekend, actually. Oh, wow. Snow buntings on the coast. Pretty cool. Anyways, why am I here today? I am here to influence you, Adrian, and everyone on Zoom, hopefully to be the next generation of scientists, because we do desperately need you. I want to inspire wonder, curiosity, and interest in sciences of our planet, and hopefully I can do that today through my knowledge and pictures of my experiences. I'm also here to warn you what's ahead. We are in a tumultuous time right now, not only to be a scientist, but to be a human on our planet. There are going to be a lot of changes coming up in the next 5 to 10 years that you all should know how to deal with. And to create progressive change for a better future. I am getting older every year, and you guys are the next generation. So it's your future that we're going to be talking about today. All right. Now, before we get into this, if anyone has any questions throughout this, please don't hesitate to ask. I will leave a big substantial time at the end too for any questions if you guys have any, or any comments that you want to make. But why is science important? Well, there's many reasons. These are just a few of them. But if you can think of something, just anything, it probably involves science. Adrian, think of what's your favorite hobby?
Video.
Video games. Perfect. Great example. Video games. I love to play video games too. It's a great pastime, really fun hobby. A lot of people have made it their careers. Coding includes science, computer sciences, technology, how electricity works, how conductivity works. Video games are all made from science. So practically anything and everything we use, want, and need in this world comes from a science. Science is life. Science is basically the study of our world, everything that lives in it, on it, where our stuff comes from, how our clothes are made, how the water we drink is cleaned on a daily basis, how the food we eat is grown. Science encompasses everything from the feeling of love to the birth of a star. So it's pretty awesome. Science also creates equality and equity. Equality means everyone gets the same playing field, but equity means understanding people's needs on a more person-to-person basis. And this is really important as we get into the future. We're going to have a much larger population, a lot more different needs as our climate changes. And as we start to understand that we're all the same species here, it's really important that we understand equity as well. And having a scientific mind can really help you understand everyone's common interests, everyone's similarities, and where our differences come from. New medicines, resources, and technology. This is extremely important as well. Science is amazing for, the COVID-19 vaccine. That was one of the fastest vaccines that we've ever created due to previous outbreaks of SARS and other respiratory viruses that were part of the cold virus family. So science really helps us create everything that we have today. And in the future can even help diminish waste, pollution, and create advances in technology, like the cameras that we're using for Zoom today. Pretty cool. And lastly, it's to survive in an uncertain future. Science has always been a big part of our lives. It's what created fossil fuels. It's what created wool clothing and the coffee we drink in the morning. Science has been around for a long, long time, but only recently are we starting to come to terms with these new sciences. For example, ecology is the study of our planet and how it works. Ecology wasn't even turned up until the mid-1960s. So there's a lot of new sciences that are still coming out today that are going to help us potentially not only save our planet, but allow us to thrive in the future as our population continues to grow. All right, so let's get into a couple of my experiences. So I have 4 experiences listed here. This was my first. We're going to go over how to get into sciences a little bit more later on. But I just want to share with you guys some of my biological field experiences. Growing up, I always wanted to work at a zoo, but oftentimes zoos require a lot to get in the door, or at least to get your foot in the door there. So I kind of went a different route, and I went out into the wilderness. So a field biology tech is basically a science position that helps grad studies, grad students, or often university studies with their outdoor research projects. So oftentimes, let's see, with this one, this was part of an Evergreen State College class that I did. It's called Summer Ornithology. But this was a I want to say 25-year continued study for every single summer. And the information that we caught here actually went back to Fish and Wildlife Services, the Oregon State Department of Fish and Wildlife, and federal agencies as well. So a lot of the information that we caught during these studies is really useful as far as migratory bird research, or even birds' diets, what they ate, and how they age. Pretty cool. So this was my first time mist netting and banding. So as you can see right through here, this was one of our camp leaders, Simone, grabbing a bird out of the mist net. Mist nets are pretty tall, really flowy nets that have these large pockets, and they're very thin netting, so birds don't see them as they fly in. And when they fly in, they get caught and land in these big, what are called sheds, these little pockets here. And oftentimes a very safe way to collect wildlife. Very rarely did we ever have a bird injured or killed during these processes. This picture right here, this is a little banding ruler. So we would measure the bird's legs before putting on these metal bands on their legs. The metal bands have numbers that are used by Fish and Wildlife to potentially get more information down the road. If that bird was ever to be caught again, they can immediately look up that number and look up all the information about that particular bird. The age, sex, size, weight, all kinds of stuff. So from that, they can get a really good idea of the health of the bird, but also where it travels and how old it is. So it's pretty cool. Now, doing field biology research, you're often in these very open rural areas. Some studies include urban areas, but many times you're pretty far from civilization. And fun fact about this place in Southeast Oregon, it's called Heart Mountain Antelope Refuge near Lakeview, Oregon. It's in the very southeastern corner of the state. It's also one of the hottest UFO spots in the country. So every single night we were seeing orange lights glow and move all around the upper parts of that ridge. So it's pretty fun. So with these experiences, you not only learn a lot about science, but you also get to learn a lot about the place that you're in, the field experience. So especially for the UFOs, this mountain in particular, we were watching UFOs circle and climb this mountain and back down. They would disappear here, reappear over here. Pretty cool. But this is Heart Mountain. This is a high desert environment here. Right here, this is Fort Rock in Eastern Oregon. Fort Rock, believe it or not, is an old coral reef. So what's really cool about our high desert area in the state is that historically used to be an ocean. So there's a lot of really cool geological sites to see out there, and a lot of amazing wildlife. Down here, this is one of my co-students sexing a Western tanager. Oftentimes you'd have to blow on their butt to see whether they had a root patch or a coical protuberance. And down here is a Mariposa lily. Some really pretty wildflowers out there. So my next experience, also through the Evergreen State College, this was a class that I took. A lot of universities offer extended learning opportunities. So instead of taking a normal class, you can actually make your own contract. And as long as you get a professor to sign off on that, you can actually basically do whatever you want or whatever you're most interested in. This technically was already a class assigned to the contract, but this was an experience I had working with this guy. This is Adam. He was a master's student at Central Washington University, and he was leading bird banding, studying how deforestation affects birds and other small animals in the Monta. The Monta is a large ancient cactus forest in southeast Sonora, Mexico. It's one of the most endangered habitats on the planet. These cacti can take upwards of 200 to 300 years to grow. Some of them were 40 to 50 feet tall and had over 100 columns. They're pretty cool. So this is a really niche study. A lot of this area, actually including this area behind the photo here, was used as shrimp farming. Surprisingly, a lot of our cocktail shrimp comes from Mexico, and they're grown in these big salt pools, similar to like a farm's irrigation pond. Now, this here is a picture of a roadrunner that we caught in one of our nets. Not a bird we would particularly go for or band, but it happened to just run right into the net. So you get a lot of really cool experiences when doing some of these studies. Oftentimes it can be life-changing in a lot of ways, especially in Mexico. You know, you're kind of in a new place. Not many people speak English. It's a very different world compared to, say, here in Hillsborough or Beaverton. Up on the left, this was the group of scientists that studied with us. Eric, right in the middle here, this was our biologist from Oaxaca. He was an excellent birder. Up here, we have a black-throated magpie jay. This is a really cool bird you often get to see. Right in the center here, this is one of our vegetation studies. Oftentimes you take pictures of your vegetation plot, not only get a sense of the plants that you're studying, but also the plot name and the degrees in which you're heading. So oftentimes within a lot of scientific studies, there's a lot of things that you have to jot down. Taking data is one of the most important things in science. From that data, we can then research, learn, and eventually make our hypotheses. One of the benefits of being in Mexico, great sunrises and sunsets. These are the pitaya cactuses that can often get 40 feet tall, and you get to kayak with dolphins. Pretty cool. So there's a lot of fun stuff. There's some more pictures from Mexico here. Top left, we have a vermilion flycatcher. Very beautiful bird. Some of the people that we worked with in our small village called Navalpatia. What's great about a lot of these scientific studies, especially in rural communities like this, is it often offers opportunity for employment. A lot of these people in Navalpatia were about a 2 hours drive from the nearest city. So work is often really hard to find. So for most of the year, a lot of our biologists that we worked under were able to employ most of the town, which is pretty cool. Right here, kind of a fuzzy picture, but this was a diamondback rattlesnake that we discovered and saved. And a lot of these small towns, a lot of historical culture reigns supreme. And it was kind of one of their pastimes. If they saw a rattlesnake, they would often kill it just to keep their town safe. So we would try to save them and put them elsewhere. Now, in a lot of these places, you often deal with consequences of being out in the middle of nowhere. The bottom left picture here, even though this looks like a pretty reflection, maybe on a stream or river, this was actually our only road in and out of the town that we were in. Oftentimes the monta, which was the cactus forest we were in, was slashed and burned to make way for agriculture. While we were there, I would say 500 to 1,000 acres of cactus forests were slashed and burned just within the 2.5 months that we were there. A lot of that forest is disappearing very rapidly, and sadly, it's due to the lack of job opportunities, because a lot of these people have land but no place to work. So they would slash and burn the cactus forest and plant pitaya or lettuce, and when they would irrigate, they often weren't trained on how to irrigate. So a lot of that water that was meant to go to the plants would go into the roadway here. So at times, I think there was a 3-week stint where we couldn't pass back and forth through the road. So we were kind of stuck where we were. So field work is just one of the many forms of science. Through this field work, I was also able to work with wildlife cameras, which is really fun. This is a whole different avenue of study that you can get into as a wildlife biologist. Especially today with the technology that we have, wildlife cameras, you can capture quite a bit. A lot of hunters use wildlife cameras to track populations of deer or elk. But these were taken right behind my tent where I slept. So we have a bobcat here walking by, maybe 15 feet behind the tent here. Coyote, here's another coyote up here. And then this, hard to see, but this is a bobcat coming straight at the picture, at the camera here. These wildlife cameras offer a great opportunity to get up and close with wildlife, which is really, really cool. And it provides a very fun avenue to kind of learn about the animals that are in the area you're studying. And third, I spent 3 years with Colorado State University, worked all 3 field seasons with the PhD student. And we did a lot of banding and mist netting, also vegetation surveys and small mammal trapping. There was actually a couple other grad students working there with us. And fun thing about this is that technically I was an Exxon employee. Sadly, with a lot of universities, there's not a lot of money in sciences. So oftentimes universities will get grants or large donations from bigger companies that maybe want them to do studies in the area where they're conducting work. In this case, we were in the Piceance Basin. The Piceance Basin is in northwestern Colorado, is the 2nd largest natural gas fracking area in North America. Other than the Bracken fields, I think that's what they're called in North Dakota. So Exxon, Chevron, Shell, they were all a part of this area. And our job was to study how deforestation efforts to build oil pads was affecting non-game species. So non-game species, including birds, small mammals, insects, plants, that kind of stuff. Now, this area is also pretty rural, and a lot of people there also have issues finding employment. So with our study here, we were able to give quite a few community members employment, but also it really highlighted the circumstances that a lot of these small communities go through, because half the year they're relying on hunting revenue for their elk populations up there or their fishing populations, but the other half comes from oil companies. And what we noticed was that a lot of these oil pads here that could be bigger than a football field contain more than 90% invasive plant species, and the oil pads themselves are extremely loud when they're drilling for oil or natural gas. And that actually decreases animal habitat. So loud noises often scare away bats, and they were scaring away the elk, in which the community used for their hunting revenue. So in a lot of ways, oil here was actually kind of destroying their way of life, even though it was providing them an income for the short term. Now, here are some pictures here. Oops. We have a push. No, okay. Sorry, I'm trying to get rid of this here. Okay, so in Colorado, we studied a lot of different study plots. Study plot is basically a plot of land where you're conducting your study. We have a lot of different areas from old burn sites here that kind of look more like a moonscape, pretty cool. Or we also have a lot of mountainous plots, similar to this aspen forest here, and pinyon juniper. PJ is what it's called, pinyon juniper forest. It's actually the largest forest type in North America, but it requires 2 major tree species, the pinyon pine and the Rocky Mountain juniper, and both are extremely slow growing. So similar to the Monte in Mexico where we studied, this was a crucial study because these forests take anywhere from 800 to 1,000 years to mature. A lot of these trees were anywhere from 700 to 1,200 years old. And oil companies were coming in to basically frack in that area. Now, roads, oil paths are splitting up a lot of that habitat, which is really making it hard for a lot of the mule deer and the Rocky Mountain elk to thrive up there. So there's a lot of different things. Also the wild horses, even though pretty are technically an invasive species in the United States. Okay. But with this experience, you get to see a lot of beauty as well. A lot of places within the Piceance Basin are still left untouched. And, you know, doing these studies, you get some free time, you get to experience a lot with wildlife and nature in general. Just being outdoors, immersed in nature is very, very beneficial in many different ways. Here we have a view from Dinosaur National Monument. These are some of the hieroglyphs and pictoglyphs left over at Dinosaur. These are about 1,000 years old. And then here we have the Cathedral Range. This was one of our study plots here. This snowy part, oftentimes we would do some late fall studies in October, early November, and that included a lot of snow trekking. But beautiful views, and you get to see a lot of places that most of the country never will see in their lifetime. Now, this is really fun. We did use wildlife cameras on our studies as well. And I particularly remember one day following this female cougar's tracks all the way to the camera site. And when I checked it, she had walked by here. This is probably a 200+ pound cat, maybe about an hour to 2 hours before I got to the camera. So it was a little sketchy, but it's kind of fun. You know, oftentimes you are put in these situations where, you know, you kind of have to rely on yourself, your skills, your observation skills, your survival skills. You have to rely on your education and the things that you've learned over the years. But this is a really pretty view of a cougar. And, you know, there's a lot of scientists that study cougars themselves. There's so many different avenues within science that you can get into. And I just love seeing wildlife up close like this. Really makes your project all worth it. All right, and lastly, my fourth field season was studying on the Mogollon Rim. So this is near Payson, Arizona. It's in between Phoenix and Flagstaff, kind of central northeast Arizona. It's a very particular habitat, similar to the Monta in Mexico. And what's really cool is this study was actually a prolonged study. The professor at University of Montana had been doing this for 25 years or more. So similar to the summer ornithology, there's a lot of data that's been collected in this over the years, and it's really shown the differences that have occurred within this habitat specifically. You wouldn't believe it by walking into this habitat, but it's in such a small microclimate, 9,000 feet up on this giant cliff, that the habitat looks almost identical to an Oregon forest or like on the coast. It's extremely moist, a lot of conifers, a lot of greenery. But we are studying the effects of climate change on the high alpine environments. These are red-faced warblers. These warblers are only found within this area of Arizona or further south in Mexico. But we were actually banding and mist netting not only just individuals, which is called constant effort mist netting and banding. Basically, you're just consistently banding and catching as many birds as you can. But we were also target mist netting. So we would target families of birds. So we would actually go out and nest search. We would find nests, mark their locations on GPS, and then the next morning or 2 days later, we would actually set mist nets out around the nest trying to catch the adults and the chicks. And what was interesting is that we would bleed all the individuals by taking a small sample of, let's see, I think I have a picture of it, maybe the next one. But we would take a small blood sample, and from that blood sample, we can study how much oxygen is in that blood. And basically, at that high of altitude, we already know the metabolic rate at which they use oxygen. So by categorizing the amounts of oxygen in these birds' bloods for the past 25 years, we can see that change and how their bodies are adapting to warmer climates or more inclement weather, more sporadically. So what was cool is that this forest has gone through a lot of changes, even since the study first started. Here in the upper left corner, you can see a lot of bare rock on the Mogollon Rim. In the early 2000s, there was a massive fire that came through. So a lot of the forest was in recovery mode. Here we have some baby mountain chickadees that the parents abandoned the nest. Oftentimes, even through nest searching or target netting adults, it was very rare for parents to abandon the nest, but it did happen only once with this study, luckily. And then up in the upper right here, we have two brown creepers. This was a pair of brown creepers that we target mist netted. Notice the pink bands here. So in banding, you can provide a metal band that has numbers that marks an individual, but you have to catch that individual to actually know what numbers it is. With these color bands, these are just little plastic color bands, you can put different color combinations on each leg. So that allows you to tell individuals from afar. So you don't have to catch them again to actually notice them or observe them. So it's pretty cool. And then what was really cool in this study, we got to explore quite a bit as well. Often with a lot of these field biology studies, you're in these really cool places, such as, you know, we were right maybe an hour's drive from Dinosaur National Monument in Utah-Colorado border. Here, we were pretty close to Flagstaff and the Oak Canyon area, which is a really pretty hiking area. And late at night, given some people had the correct permits, we were able to band this flammulated owl. Pretty cool. Notice the dark black eyes. Owls have very different colored eyes to help them adapt to hunting at different times of the day. Flammulated owls only hunted in the middle of the night. Pretty cool. Now here on the bottom left, this is Bonnie, one of our biologists from Borneo. He was helping bleed this Western tanager. And it's a small tube. We just make a tiny little incision, very similar to a shot you get at the doctor's office, in their wing muscle. And we would collect just a small amount of blood and then hold a little cotton swab over that until the blood coagulated and stopped bleeding. So it's pretty cool. Didn't really harm the birds at all. They were up and flying in a matter of minutes. And with this study, we got to see not only a lot of cool places. This is Mountain Preserve in Phoenix, and a really cool lake that we got to swim at on our days off. But you also get to see some really cool birds and animals. This is an acorn woodpecker. We were able to catch a common raven as well, which is really cool. It kept getting into our trash pile. So you get to experience a lot of different things that you never would think possible through science. So those were some of my experiences. Granted, I haven't done any geology work or physics work, but that is up to you. Science is all about learning about what you're interested in, doing what interests you most, what you're passionate about. So let's talk a little bit about the future of science, because this is really important. Our world is changing faster than ever. And oftentimes now, with the amount of scientists we have, we're having a hard time keeping up with studying it. So we need more scientists. That is dire, because especially as of late, I'm sure most of you have been aware with the election of Donald Trump as president and other conservative Republicans and their viewpoints, scientific fact has become an opinion, when in reality, science will always be right, whether you believe in it or not. It's a famous quote by Neil deGrasse Tyson, and that is true. Science, as of now, may not be entirely correct, but that's the beauty of science. We're always studying and learning new things and changing the laws of science as we go. But science, especially peer-reviewed science, is crucial. An opinion would be seeing someone's post on Facebook and calling that, talking to your friends about that. Or scientific fact is someone who is going out, studying, asking questions, doing research, taking data, and allowing other peers, other scientists, or other community members to review that experiment, redo that experiment, see if they get the same results, and only then can it be considered scientific fact after multiple times of studying it. And that gets rid of a lot of the potential miscalculations or changes that may happen over time. So scientific fact is fact. And that is crucial. So some of the scientists that are crucially needed at the moment, there's many different avenues of science, kind of like we talked earlier, ologies. Adrian, you're really into video games. Are you thinking about going into computer sciences? No, you want environmental science, right? You have a certain avenue you're trying to study?
Earth science.
Earth science? Nice, like ecology, more or less, right? Nice, okay. Wonderful. So earth sciences, that's kind of the first one that I have up. Climatologists. This picture here is a picture of our jet stream. And this is actually most crucial because this is what's changing the most. As we pollute our atmosphere more and more, our poles are melting. And our North and South Pole are more or less the engines of our planet. So they are constantly churning our ocean currents and our wind currents. So we have a polar air and a polar jet stream up here that normally is pushed against an equator or central air jet stream here. So the warm air pushes up against the cold air that pushes down. And as our poles melt, the engines for that are starting to weaken. So our jet streams are starting to weaken. And over the last few years, I'm sure you guys have seen on the news, but Texas has frozen over in the last few winters. And that is because these weakened engines allow our jet stream to become more fluid and fluctuate a lot more and at farther depths. So hot air can push further up north, cold air can push further down south. This is why we had the heat dome in Portland about 2 years ago. This is why California had the heat dome this summer. And this is why Texas has frozen over the last few winters. Now, what's really cool about climatology and climatologists is that they are doing a lot of really interesting research at the moment, and they are potentially going to help us track and create warning systems for future climate events. A great study would be the University of Arizona back in 2019 did an ice core study in Greenland. And from these really deep ice cores, they were able to track all the carbon dioxide and oxygen bubbles within the ice. And those air bubbles are great indications of what the atmosphere was like maybe 100 to 300 years ago. And what's cool is that they were able to actually determine that almost every food famine that we've gone through throughout human history, great case, the potato famine in Ireland, was actually due to a large fluctuation in our jet streams. So the potato famine was met by a very cold, brutal winter that depleted nutrients within the soil and didn't allow potatoes to grow. So throughout history, we can actually determine previous climate events and weather events, and potentially, hopefully, plan for the future. Agriculture and food stability. Food sciences are really important as well. As our climate change and as our weather becomes more unpredictable, it's going to be harder to grow large amounts of food. As our population exponentially grows every single day, there's going to be more mouths to feed as well. So we're going to have to create more food using less resources and less space. Because as it is as a whole, we do not have enough space on this planet to actually grow enough food for 9 billion people. So there's going to be a lot of new sciences and potential job opportunities within that area. This here is a picture of Silver Falls State Park. And what's really going to be needed as well is hydrologists, water conservationists. Water is becoming scarce. As you've probably seen, Cape Town in South Africa nearly faced day zero about a year or two ago. Many towns and cities like Phoenix, Arizona are going to face day zero potentially very soon in the future. Day zero means the water has run out, especially right now, the Colorado River. The treaties are run on about a 200-year-old tree that accommodated for a very high level year for the Colorado River. So today, there's a lot less water. I'm sure you guys have all seen Lake Powell at its very small percentage, like about 30% of average. So water conservationists, hydrologists, this is going to be a very important scientific field to get into. Other is biologists, botanists, life sciences. Life sciences are crucial right now. Soil scientists, conservationists, anything to do with life is going to be really important because studying animals and the life within our planet can really help us get a great view into how they're adapting or how we could potentially change to meet this new climate that we're creating. A great example would be starfish. In 2017, we had a viral outbreak due to warmer oceans that affected starfish's ability to create carbonate for their shells. And what was really cool is that just within one generation of starfish, they were able to adapt and evolve an immunity to that virus outbreak. So we nearly lost starfish on the West Coast within 1 year, but then a year later, populations were near back to full because they had evolved so quickly. So a lot of life sciences are also showing how well and how quickly evolution can work within our planet as well. And with our changing climate, a lot of species are being forced to adapt. Another great example is at Jackson Bottom Wetlands where I work. Within the last 3 years, we have had a couple of new species make their home there. The black phoebe, which is a type of flycatcher. We have at least 3 nesting pairs now at the wetlands, where previously 5 years ago, you wouldn't have seen a phoebe further north than say Medford, Oregon. Now you can see them all the way up through central British Columbia. So many species are moving. Actually, just this last weekend, the first moose was ever recorded in Mount Rainier National Park. And these moose are potentially changing habitats as well. So birds have been a great adapter to a changing climate, but now we're starting to see mammals, insects, reptiles all start to adapt to our changing world. Other crucial avenues, astrophysicists, engineers, space. You know, how do we make things better? This is a really crucial avenue of sciences, and it's a very large avenue of sciences. I don't know what you guys on Zoom are looking to get into, but I guarantee one of you at least will probably want to be doing some type of engineering, building, architecture. It's all really important. Making things more sustainable, more productive, creating less waste, and looking towards space for the future. As we grow as a species, we're not only going to need more food, but more resources. And what a lot of companies and governments haven't really realized until now is that our planet is finite. There is an end to everything. We are not 10,000 miles long. We're only about, what, say 3,000 from here to New York. We have a very limited amount of space, limited amount of resources. And the more people, the more resources we're going to need. So we need to find new viable resources, such as some of the new metals that we found from the moon in some recent asteroid studies, which is really cool, and potentially in the future, a new home. You guys really are not too old to potentially see that in the future. Right now, NASA is literally working on a wormhole and warp speed device. And within the next 10 to 15 years, we potentially could see human trials of that, which is pretty cool. So we're going to be able to travel our universe potentially very soon. And then lastly, political sciences and educators. For me, as a wildlife biology tech, after doing it for 4 seasons, it was pretty evident to me that I wasn't going to make a living doing wildlife biology. Oftentimes, as a wildlife biologist, you kind of need to move up the ranks, as in most jobs, either through getting a graduate degree or potentially finding a job within a university. But for me, I kind of went the educator route. And educators are desperately needed because educators are what create the future scientists. I don't know if you guys have ever had a favorite science teacher yet. I can remember one of my favorite science teachers taught us all about microbiology. We did all kinds of dissections in class, and it really kind of opened my eyes to biology itself and the potential for it as a career. So educators are desperately needed to not only help relay scientific facts, but also to really ignite that flame and that passion for science within people. Now, politically, that is also needed. Even though you may not go into science if you don't choose, having a scientific mind is really important. And going into politics with that scientific mind can really benefit not only your community, but the world around us. Right now, we have experienced every single year all of the world's leaders gathering together at COP, and every year it seems like they agree maybe on one thing, because they can't get their heads around the real importance of science and what it means for them rather than the money in their pockets. So how do I get into sciences? This is really important. You can get into sciences through a diverse amount of ways. But oftentimes starting as soon as you can is going to be really important. So Adrian, do you want to go into environmental sciences or sciences? Do you do anything as like a hobby that kind of encompasses that, or no?
Well, I go to environmental club.
Oh, okay, great. Environmental club. That's a great way to start. I will say this, as a scientist, often with most jobs, it's all about who you know, and scientific clubs are a great way to meet other scientists or potential new employers even as well. So that's a great way to start. So I highly recommend joining a club. If you can, donate to your favorite society, volunteer your time if you have that available. You can volunteer often even at the wetlands where I work. We have volunteer events. We have potential avenues for high schoolers that want to do potentially nature education, that kind of stuff. A lot of companies will have these opportunities. Oftentimes it just takes a little effort in looking. But also your high school. Check with your school, check with your biology teacher, check with your counselors. There may be opportunities that your school has or knows of that you can really get involved with. Especially here in the Hillsborough Beaverton area, they are fairly advanced and progressive. I don't know about Beaverton particularly, but I know Hillsborough is a green renewable city. They get 80% or more of their energy from renewable energy. We have a lot of parks, a lot of habitat and preserve space. So it's a pretty progressive city in that point. Community college or universities, extended education is probably going to be needed. You know, a lot of scientific jobs, especially these days, even education jobs, will take experience. If you have enough years of it over, say, a college degree. But oftentimes to get that experience, you first need that college degree. It's kind of a weird loophole that this has going. But community colleges, especially like PCC, any local areas are often going to be a little bit cheaper than a state college or university. And hopefully by the time you guys get to that point, we're going to have a different system for college loans and college debt. I know me personally, I chose to go to Evergreen because it was actually cheaper than a lot of my community colleges in the Seattle area. And I wanted to get a different style of education. So do your research. Most colleges and universities offer scientific courses and classes. But if you know that you're already specifically interested in a kind of science, do your research. I really wanted to go to University of Hawaii because they have an amazing avian program. They do a lot of ornithology studies over there just because of all of the native Hawaiian birds that live in the islands. But I didn't have good enough SAT scores. So there's a lot of things that encompass it, but starting now, when you're in high school volunteering, that's only going to add to your resume and add to your list of experiences. So you're really going to kind of build that gap when you get to that point where you want to choose careers. And then lastly, experience matters as well. Kind of like I mentioned, a lot of jobs right now, technically you don't need a master's degree or a doctorate's degree. As long as you have that equivalent experience, you're often good to go, or a qualified candidate. That being said, a lot of science jobs are pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, yeah, they're really popular. They're very popular. Basically, it can be pretty hard to get into sciences at first, depending on which jobs you're doing.
Competitive.
Competitive. Thank you. Yes, competitive. But depending on your sciences, you know, earth sciences, environmental sciences, there's a huge wide range of stuff you could do. And there's actually a lot of opportunities within that area. But for someone like me who chose ornithology, which is a very minute, specific area of science, I remember specifically applying to a job in Belize, doing bird banding and whatnot. And I was number 3. It was hiring for 2 positions, and I was number 3 on the list of 500 applicants. So there's, you know, depending on the job, depending on what science you're trying to learn, the job may be wide open, or it could be very, very competitive. So, you know, do your research. And if it is competitive, try to think of things that might put you ahead of other people, you know, and this is where that volunteering, joining clubs right now as a high school student really comes into play. So what are the benefits of being a scientist? We're going to talk a little bit about it next slide, but there's not a whole lot of financial benefits, also depending on what science you get into, but there's a lot of moral and ethical benefits to this. One being it feels good, caring for the planet, getting to handle and treat wildlife, or getting to experience these new wild places, or learning new things about something you're interested in, like microbiology or viruses, or, you know, sustainability. It really incites a fire within you to keep wanting to learn more. And it's a great, great feeling to have. Travel and experiences. Granted, if you're doing lab work or lab sciences, you're probably not going to get to travel as much, but field sciences, you get to travel a lot. I got to go to some really amazing places that I never would have visited without doing biological field work. And people as well. You know, not only are you seeing these amazing places, this here is a picture of Zion. I had, when I was driving down to the Mogollon Rim, I just stopped at Zion because it was right along the highway I was taking. So it's a great opportunity to see, national parks or monuments that you are never going to get to see. And then the people as well. You're often going to meet a lot of really fun people. In field sciences particularly, you are often within a small group of people, so it can kind of become like a family atmosphere. You get to make long, life-lasting friends, relationships, meet people from different states, from different countries, and really get a sense of, just how wonderful the human species really is. And then you also get a chance to help the planet. That's really important, especially in earth sciences. Whatever you do is going to be benefiting not only our planet, but potentially us in the future, which is really cool to think about. Not any one person can make a big enough change to save everything, but all together, we can do our little jobs and our small tasks that really combine to make lasting progressive change. And then getting the opportunity to work up close and personal with nature or with people or with the things that you really like. I specifically remember in college getting the opportunity to use these really large, massive electron microscopes and getting to see bacteria and viruses like up close. It's pretty cool. You get to use a lot of cool equipment and potentially get to learn maybe new interests that you never would have thought of possible. And then the last is loving what you do. This one's huge for me. I've done a lot of different jobs throughout my life, from moving deliveries to maintenance jobs. And, working in sciences is by far, one of the only jobs I've ever had where I feel really good about it at the end of the day. Doesn't necessarily feel like a job to me. It becomes a passion, becomes something that you love to do. That being said, oftentimes that can be taken advantage of. So you do want to be careful and like kind of planning out, if you want to go to a certain school or what jobs you want to look for in the future, look at that financial aspect of it too. Because sadly, especially since Donald Trump was president, he defunded a lot of our federal scientific agencies like the EPA or the Forest Service, and we were expected to do more with less money. So the issue today is that sciences are not fully funded by any means. Granted, private sectors like Intel or Genentech, Nike even for that matter, have a lot of money. They're very big, pretty rich companies, and they can afford to pay their scientists very well. So as a scientist, you're really not going to make a whole bunch of money. You're not going to get rich off of it, especially working for state, federal, or universities, because there's just not enough money put into those avenues. And this kind of goes back to why jobs are pretty competitive to these days. I felt that the bird research that I was doing was pretty important. We were getting a lot of information on birds that many people didn't study, like sage thrashers. And we were getting a lot of good information on how animals are adapting to climate change or how they're adapting to the growth and expansion of the oil industry. And sadly, with that, working for those companies, say my Colorado experience with Exxon, a lot of the grad students' papers were redacted by Exxon. So they took out a lot of the stuff, a lot of the findings that we had there to make them look better. But because they gave the school a couple $1 million, they're good to go. So you really have to be observant about the sciences you get into, who you're typically working for, what they're asking of you, and how much they're paying you. Because as a scientist, your work is very valuable. Your data is extremely valuable. Take a look at most social media companies today. They're so rich because they've been trading data, information. Information is the new gold, and it's only going to be a matter of time before more scientists are actually recognized for providing that information, because I'd say a great example of this is with COVID-19. COVID-19 really put a huge stop in our economy. It stopped people from transferring goods. It stopped people from buying things. It lost a lot of money for our government and for big companies. So what did they do? They threw hundreds of millions of dollars into bat research because this was the animal that was suspected to start COVID-19 or spread it. So what's really cool since then is we'll get into a little bit more of those findings later, but because it was a necessity, all this money got thrown into this small area of science, and all these new discoveries came about it, which is really cool. So pretty soon, you know, a lot of these scientific fields, even bird research, are going to have a lot more funding because it's going to be a necessity. We are kind of putting ourselves in a place with our climate, with our habitable environment, that scientists are going to be needed desperately. And eventually businesses will recognize that they can't run their business without a habitable planet or without the scientists that provide them the information. So really important, but a little bit about my experience. You know, my dad for the first few years always asked me, when am I going to get a real job? And so it's, you know, with some of the field jobs that I was looking at, especially if you are looking to travel to other places, in the winter here in North America, there's not a lot of field biology jobs offered, but there are quite a bit in, say, Mexico and Central America, or even South America, further south where it's closer to summertime or the equator. And what was interesting is that depending on who's conducting the study, whether it's a university or say a nonprofit or a private entity, you were often paid anywhere from $1,500 a month, which is about standard living wage, or, well, minimum wage, I would say at this point, or you often had to pay them. There was a few tropical bird studies that I was really interested in, studying macaws and other parrots, that you had to pay them $500 a month just to go work there. So do your due diligence, do your research, you know, see what sciences pay more. But I'm going to tell you right now, especially earth sciences, you're in the clear. You're going to be great, especially getting in with a state or federal agency. You're going to have a really nice cushy job, good benefits, good pay. It's going to be all of the above. The time for science is now. Kind of like we talked about, we are in a changing process. Every single day, we emit more and more pollution into our atmosphere, into our oceans, into our soils. And, you know, every day that is sped up. Our planet has a lot of natural loopholes that help control our climate, such as, great example I put on here is sea ice and sea water. Ice is white or clear, right? So it reflects sunlight back up into the atmosphere and out into space, kind of helping cool our planet. Whereas seawater is dark. It's very black, very bluish color. So that darker color absorbs more sunlight and more heat energy. So it actually warms the melting ice caps faster. Same thing with our wildfires. We've had a lot of increased size and intensity of our wildfires the last 10 years. And as we have more wildfires, the more black soot that can float onto our much needed glaciers for drinking water. And that dark gray to black ash actually absorbs more heat from the sun and melts our glaciers faster. So these natural loopholes are actually speeding up climate change faster than our models can predict. So oftentimes when you hear scientists say, oh, we're not going to experience this till 2050 or 2100, it could potentially be 20 to 30 years earlier than that, just due to these natural loopholes. This here is a picture of Mount Hood. This was back, I believe, in 2020. This was November 3rd. November 3rd, Mount Hood looked like this. So this is the reason for action. You know, Mount Hood provides all of the drinking water for the Portland area. Within the last, I would say 3 months, or say within the last year, the last 3 months, they've started construction. Within the last year, Hillsborough, Beaverton, Cedar Hills, a lot of these communities here, which get their water from the Tualatin River, we are now creating and building pipes to get water from the Willamette River. We have grown as a community so much, and the Tualatin River has dipped so much in water availability that we now need a second river to get water from. So water scarcity is going to be extremely important to look out for. As our cities grow, we're going to need more resources of water. And as our glaciers continue to melt and less snowfall becomes available most of the year, we're going to see a lot of kinks in our system there. Now, things you can do to help. Needless to say, this is if you can. Granted, becoming a scientist is amazing. Doing what we can on a daily basis is a small change, but it's a necessary change. A lot of the conveniences that we have now are not going to be available in the future 5 to 10 years from now. A lot of the food items we have are probably not going to be available 5 to 10 years from now. So we really need to start changing our ways and how we live within society. It's actually surprising because many people think we have to completely change our whole lives to be able to become sustainable. But in reality, we don't have to change that much. And a lot of things you can do is basically eat seasonal, eat less meat. Granted, I myself love a good cheeseburger. It's delicious, but eating less of those can really help reduce the amount of pollution. 33% of our pollution comes from agriculture. 70% or nearly 70% of our land is used to grow hay and alfalfa for cattle, for meat production. So, you know, replacing some of that for plant food production could be extremely beneficial, not only for our environment, but for our future food supplies. Eating local and seasonal really helps a lot of our local farmers out here as well. Oregon is fairly progressive within its agricultural restrictions and regulations. So a lot of farmers here in the Hillsborough area use mason bees instead of honeybees. They use native bees. They use less fertilizers, less pesticides. A lot of them often are doing regenerative soil techniques. So supporting your local farmers can really be beneficial because then it also cuts the pollution of that transportation from where your food comes from. Energy. You know, a lot of these things often can require money or a small investment to get into. And this is kind of where, you know, science and equity and quality are coming into play. Is as we learn these new technologies and new techniques and methods to build things, it makes them cheaper, more accessible to everyone. And that's highly important. So, you know, if you can't invest in solar panels, if you can't invest in PGE's renewable energy program, which provides wind power and solar energy for homes instead of fossil fuels, you can do a lot of other things. Obviously, turning out the lights has been used for 20 plus years. But your lights don't use that much electricity. You know, oftentimes turning off or unplugging your TV or your game system when not in play, your game system is going to be fine. Your TV is going to be fine. And it's not using up energy just waiting to be turned on. So you can unplug things when not in use, and that really helps kind of limit your energy bill and the pollution that we create. But that being said, 70% of all our pollution on our planet comes from factories, industries, big business. So in the grand scheme of things, what we do at home really doesn't have that big of an impact. But over time, as there's more and more people, that may grow. So starting that change now can really have a beneficial impact in the future. Water is another important one. Las Vegas is actually a great example. Similar to Phoenix, Las Vegas is expanding exponentially. Surprisingly, they're one of the fastest growing cities in the country right now. It's kind of weird. But they, just like LA, Santa Fe, a lot of other big towns get their water from the Colorado River, which we all know has been drying up due to the low levels in Lake Mead. And what's interesting is that just going grassless, replacing your grass lawn at home, changing your landscape from, non-native ornamental plants to native plants, that just those two things alone can really have a big reduction in your water use. Fixing leaky faucets. A leaky faucet can actually drain up about 7 gallons of water in a day. So it's a lot of water that can come from just a little drop. But there's many different ways that we can really kind of fix our water usage. Bottled water is another one. Sadly, in California, due to the massive mega drought that we've been having over the last 30 years, the state there, along with Oregon and Washington, are limiting farmers on their water usage first. And they're limiting residential second, and then businesses third. And what's surprising about that is that even though farmers who grow, say, our lettuce and broccoli and strawberries that we eat and need to eat for subsistence, are more regulated than our water bottle companies or our almond farmers. California especially has not put any limits on water bottle companies. So similar to the issues that I saw in Colorado with the oil companies, fishermen and fly fishermen were actually banned from fishing in the river when it got too low, but oil companies were still allowed to drain water for their oil pads. So allowing these certain companies to do that really isn't benefiting us or the planet in any way, shape, or form, because bottled water oftentimes is just city municipal water. A lot of times it says it comes from a spring, quote unquote, when in reality, that spring is probably dried up 5 or 10 years ago. Great observation, or great one is Dannon Life Water. If you look at the back, it says Denver City Water. So it's kind of ridiculous. It's basically just an extra step, an extra piece of pollution and plastic waste that we're going through, and taking water straight from your taps, especially if you have an ability to clean it, is going to be much better for you in the long run and for the planet. Waste is another one. Obviously composting is really important, but I myself live in an apartment. I don't have a lot of space to do that. So there's other ways to try to limit your waste. Buying bulk can often sometimes be cheaper and create less waste. Reusing glass jars to keep food in. Do some research with that, because there's so many different ways to kind of reduce your waste at home. Like many people say, voting with your dollar or buying, more locally made stuff, more sustainably made stuff is really going to help cut down on waste as well. Sadly, Amazon is a really big contributor to a lot of our waste these days, because they are literally everywhere. A lot of people buy it from Amazon, buy everything they need from it. But buying from more local can actually create a lot less waste, less plastic waste, less paper waste, and less pollution from shipping and transportation. And lastly, politics. I know you said you're a junior, right, Adrian? Okay, so another year or two, you'll be able to be voting age, right? Sweet, yeah, you get 18. So, a lot of you guys may not be old enough to vote yet, but when you are age ready to vote, it's great to do your research now, because by the time you are ready to vote, you can really get an understanding of what are the most important needs today. Oftentimes, when you look at politics, you come up with healthcare, gun reform, student loan debts. All of these things would not be possible if it wasn't for a habitable planet. Healthcare, our health in general as humans, is going to deteriorate if we can't breathe the air outside, or we're lacking water or lacking food.
which is only going to cause more troubles within the healthcare system later on. So politically wise, we need to take care of this big issue first and really dive into promoting the sciences as a whole, because that will encompass everything else. Now, I know we've talked a lot about potentially what's happening, what can happen in the future, but all is not lost yet. There is a lot of things that we still have left to preserve and explore. Our oceans are a great one. We've only explored maybe 2% of our ocean floor, maybe 5% of our total oceans. There's a lot of things that are still left out there to discover, to learn about, especially within our universe. With the creation of the James Webb Telescope, we are finding that our Big Bang Theory may not be correct, that it may be way older than we ever predicted. It's really, really cool, these new discoveries that we are coming up with, but it's important to know too that, to save what we have now, we must act today. And that's the most important thing. Providing more scientists to the world is only going to help us change for the better. There are a lot of, demoralizing things that are happening on the planet today. A lot of saddening things. But it's really important not to get discouraged. I myself as a scientist often get pretty discouraged. Getting into the scientific world, you really kind of get a backstage view to what's really going on. How companies are really treating their customers or the planet, or how government agencies keep putting these larger, environmental issues on the back burner, when in reality, they need to be taken care of now. So the sooner we can act on this, the sooner we can save what we love. I hope all of you have gotten the chance to explore some of the state's national parks. I've never been to Crater Lake, but I hear it's beautiful. Mount Rainier National Park, just north in Washington, is an amazing place to go look and walk around. Our national park system is a great example of how conservation and how the love for our planet that gave our species a home and a life can really benefit us in the future. These are places that we still have and still can go see and touch and smell and feel. And I highly recommend that you guys all get a chance to do that. Even if it's just in your own backyard, go hug a tree, go sniff some lichen, go touch it, feel a mushroom, go say hi to some birds in your backyard. Getting close and, personal with nature can really have a lasting effect, not only on your mental health, but on, kind of your future attributes, what you want to do in life. What are your goals? What are your morals that you stand by? So with that, I want to go over some of the cool new discoveries and things that we're working on. Because like I said in science, we're discovering new stuff all the time. So it's really, really cool to see how science really works and what these benefits and all these, all this effort, this work, and this money is actually going into playing out for our future. First, one of the newest discoveries, the digital baby wormhole, which is pretty cool. Caltech just made a digital wormhole. So it technically wasn't in real life, but on a computer. They were able to create a small wormhole. And when sending a computerized rubber duck through, it split apart into all different kinds of ways and then came right back into the exact rubber duck that was sent through. So they are on the verge of potentially discovering the inner workings of a true wormhole. Pretty cool. Albert Einstein really theorized that all these things were possible. And now, slowly but surely, we are really starting to put these into scientific fact, which is pretty cool. The warp space drive too, that we kind of mentioned earlier. You know, scientists often believe that instead of traveling from point A to point B, you can just fold space-time and go right through. And in reality, we can. And slowly but surely, NASA is actually working on that. And within, say, 10 to 15 years, we might see some real progress on that. And especially with space exploration, we just sent Artemis 1 back to the moon. It's our first moon mission in over 50 years. It was unmanned, but it was successful enough that NASA says we are ready to send humans back. And a part of equality and equity, we're now going to send our first female astronaut to the moon too, which is really, really cool. So, you know, we are slowly but surely expanding our knowledge of not only our planet, but our universe. And there are so many positive things to look forward to, even in, you know, a time such as dim as this. Now with the COVID-19 research, the bats, that was really cool. If any of you have it at home, I'm sure you guys all have streaming services, right? You have like a streaming service. If you can, it's free to get the PBS app, Public Broadcasting System. It's amazing. There was a Nova episode about bats' superpowers. And this was an episode explaining all the crazy and cool information that was found from the bat research. So again, due to COVID-19, millions of dollars was dumped into bat research to kind of help progress this potentially new vaccine or to understand more about the virus. And what they discovered was that bats are way more interesting than we lead on. And they actually break a lot of the physical and biological laws and rules that we've set up for animals. One in particular being normally the smaller the animal, the shorter the lifespan. Oftentimes tiny little mayflies like this may live a day, if that, or a small little Pacific wren this big may live 3 to 4 years. But a bat this size can live up to 50 years. And what's really cool is that we discovered their chromosomes, or XY chromosomes, they have telomeres at the end of it. And our telomeres are kind of the tail ends of our chromosomes, which shorten over time. And that shortening process is what causes our aging. As our skin starts to get old and wrinkly or droopy, or our knees and joints start to wear out. It happens to pretty much all life, except for bats. Bats do not age. They don't age at all. A 2-year-old bat looks just as youthful and vibrant as a 21-year-old bat does. It's really cool. So what we've discovered is that their telomeres do not shrink at all. The only cause of death for bats is often infections or external reasons of death, like running into something or being predated on. So it's pretty amazing. And potentially in the future, that data and discoveries will be used in research to create youthful new techniques for humans, potentially anti-aging creams or injections, all kinds of stuff. It's pretty interesting. The other things that they discovered is a bat is the fastest flying animal on the planet. Peregrine falcons can fly at over 250 miles, but they use gravity at a dive to push them that fast. Whereas a Mexican free-tailed bat can fly under her own weight at over 100 miles an hour for 3 straight hours.
Wow.
So they're extremely strong and powerful and great at flying. And what was really cool is that the additive of their unshortening telomeres, their muscle strength, and the cooling mechanisms that their muscles have for flying at such high speeds for so long actually incited a completely different immune system than what we're used to as well. So bats did carry COVID-19. They did discover that. But it was believed that it was passed through their droppings onto another animal that was potentially eaten, especially in wet markets in China. Wild animals are still legal for sale. So oftentimes you'd have multiple cages stacked on top of each other, often different species accompanied with each other. So if one of those species is carrying a virus, it's pretty easy for them to transfer it to other animals as well. And that's potentially how it's believed to be contracted. But what is really cool is that their immune system is always on. Ours is stopped. So it takes a little bit of time to recognize the viral or bacterial threat when we get sick. So that's why we get sick for at least a few days or a week before our immune system can really kick in and fight it off. That's immune systems are constantly always on. So they're constantly fighting whatever viral infections and sicknesses they may be carrying. So bat with COVID-19 is not going to look sick, but it is infected. This is often why bat researchers have to get rabies shots, because many bats will carry rabies. They don't show any signs of it, but if you get bit with rabies, that's kind of a death sentence. So a lot of bat researchers have to wear thick gloves, get a rabies vaccine. But what's really cool is bat researchers will actually use mist nets, just like I use for bird banding. But with that, they found that bats can carry 60 different viruses and diseases at any given time. So imagine being infected with not only COVID-19, but the flu, RSV, AIDS, all kinds of these other viruses all at once, but being completely fine and just living your life like normal. So it's pretty amazing. So just putting more money into a lot of these scientific avenues, we're going to be able to discover things that we never would have thought possible. And it's only going to benefit us in the future as well. So this is a really, really cool discovery that was recently made here. Thought to be extinct species, which is also really cool. With our habitat loss and climate change, sadly, we are in a mass extinction event. Every year, we're losing close to 1 million species. Which is pretty insane. And I think it's within just the next few years, most of our large megafauna are going to become endangered. And as it stands at the moment, amphibians is a great example. We have over 500 species of amphibians that are listed as threatened or endangered right now. And that's huge because there's only a few thousand within the world. So, new discoveries, field research into these thought extinct animals or endangered species can not only help potentially preserve their species for the future, but also preserve that habitat and develop new ways on how to save it, or potentially, give that community a new avenue or a new area of revenue instead of, say, logging or mining within that area. And also new innovations for society. Being a scientist, you don't necessarily have to study the planet or, animals or space. Like I talked about earlier, you can be an engineer, you can be, an earth scientist studying chemistry or physics, how the world works, what we can do better as a society. One of my favorite scientific studies, other than ornithology, is mycology. It's the study of fungi. Now, technically fungi is an organism, so it is life sciences, but mycelium, which is the small white root-like hairs that grow underground from mushrooms, it is by far one of the most golden tickets that we have for the future. What's really cool is that, as you all know, plastic pollution has become a big thing. We have the large trash islands in the Pacific Ocean. We have microplastics now floating through our air, floating through the water in our soils. Every week we eat about 1 credit card of plastic just without even knowing it. That's how much plastic is in our environment right now. But mycelium can not only replace plastic as a material to use, say, within hospitals or your food packaging or even your shoes and clothing, but it can also be useful in reducing that pollution and waste. If anyone's ever had an oyster mushroom, you ever tried an oyster mushroom before? So they're pretty popular out here. A lot of places have like oyster burgers you can get. But oyster mushrooms, along with a few other species, have actually been found to digest plastic. So mushrooms, which is really cool, been around about 300 million years longer than plants have. So many scientists believe that they are the sole reason why we have the environment we have today, how humans are able to survive and thrive on this planet, and why we have all the delicious food sources we have, say like strawberries or watermelon or chicken. It's all due to mushrooms because they were the only organisms able to break down volcanic rock into usable nutrients for other animals. So what's really cool is that now, kind of like the volcanic rock, 800 million years ago, we now have all this indigestible plastic that's everywhere. And mushrooms can digest that plastic. So we're a lot of scientists at Cal Berkeley, University of Washington, a lot of West Coast universities, especially because of the big Pacific trash island. They are using mushrooms to break down this plastic into its organic compounds that can then be used by other things like plants or can be easily recycled. Sadly, with plastic, we often recycle a lot of our plastic, but many plastic can only be recycled once, or many plastics like number 5s, like these tables or what we use for our computers and our takeout containers or even our Tupperware is not recyclable. Some private companies have learned ways to recycle it, but on a global scale, governments and federal agencies do not recycle it. So it becomes waste. And since plastic is made from oil, it is technically not an organic material. So what happens is it doesn't break down, it doesn't decompose like normal stuff. So it just gets smaller and smaller. The sun and elements wither it down and break it into smaller and smaller pieces. Hence why we have microplastics now. So mushrooms will be able to eat that plastic and break it down into compounds that other animals and plants can use. Oh, thank you, Harvey. Thank you for that shout out. Love it. All right, so I want to end here. We'll get into questions if you guys have any, but I do want to end here on a little note just about other potentials. And I want to show you a little video here that's really cool. One of the animals that was recently found is this one. Hold on 1 second here. Ooh, sorry, 1 second. Okay. Oh, all right. Well, this is just a picture. This is a picture of Yosemite. This is Nevada Falls here. This is a hike that I did earlier this summer. This is Liberty Dome and Half Dome in the back there. Just to kind of give you a sense that our beauty is still not lost. Our planet is still extremely wild and very much flourishing. But it's starting to wither, and this is why we are needed. But I want to show you guys a couple of videos here. This is the black-naped pheasant pigeon. It's a random little bird that lives in Papua New Guinea, which is an island just north of Australia in the South Pacific. It's the island home to all the birds of paradise, which I'm sure you guys have all seen. If you haven't seen this video yet, I know it's been on the news recently because this bird was lost to science for over 140 years. It was last seen in, I believe, the late 1800s and thought to be extinct. A lot of small tropical islands have a lot of extinction events, either due to rats and other animals that are brought over. A great example is the Guam and the brown tree snake, which is completely decimated native bird species there because it eats eggs, or the mongoose in Hawaii, which they brought over to get rid of the rat population, but they didn't realize that mongoose are active during the day and rats are active at night. So the mongoose ended up eating all of the native bird eggs instead. That's called biocontrol, and that's a whole other avenue of science that many places still use today, surprisingly. But this is a really cool video because this kind of shows you not only how wildlife cameras can be useful, but also it shows you the empathy in which the scientists have for the project and for the animal itself. So this is the black-naped pheasant pigeon. A pretty cool little bird. Notice how it flicks its tail kind of up and down. Short video, but it's pretty good evidence in which it was caught. Now, also pretty cool science here. Okay. Okay. Now, this kind of shows you their first sighting of the video. Sorry, a little bit. They are extremely excited. This is what being a scientist. You know, this is a local researcher from New Guinea here that has been working with these universities and finding this for the peasant. So to me, that is exactly what being a scientist really entails. You put a lot of work, you put a lot of effort into your research, and when it really comes to so it's a really amazing feeling. And this is why, you know, personally, I became a scientist. Is I just got really into the magpies are calling in the background, but it really just shows you the empathy and the emotions that go into scientists, because, you know, we don't want to lose an animal to extinction. We don't want to lose the planet to climate change. We want to keep our daily lives as they are. We want to be able to go hang out with friends and family and not have to worry about, you know, this mega 200-year blizzard that's coming through, or, you know, where are we going to get our water next week? You know, we really want to keep the planet that gave us life healthy and happy. And, you know, being a scientist can really bring that joy out in people. And lastly, I want to show you some Hubble, or not Hubble, but James Webb telescope pictures. Because in the grand scheme of things, our planet is not only finite, it's extremely tiny. We are one of potentially trillions, if not hundreds or millions of trillions of species that live throughout our universe. Every single dot that you see in these pictures is a star or a galaxy. And this one right here, this galaxy, every single dot here is a separate galaxy. Now, our Milky Way galaxy contains, I want to say, 10 billion stars potentially. Each star has the potential to have anywhere from 1 to 10 planets orbiting around it. And so the amount of potential for life within our universe is astronomical. You know, the question has always been, are we alone in the universe? But for scientists, it's the opposite. You know, are we alone in the universe is actually kind of a scary analogy, because thinking about it, it's how many other forms of life are out there. You know, speaking with some of the scientific discoveries, I think it was back in 2015, we landed a drone orbiter on Saturn's moon, Titan. And Titan has a very similar atmosphere and environment to Earth, but the liquid that's on its surface is not water, it's liquid methane. Now, what's really cool is that we are carbon-based life forms. Our planet has adapted and grown all of these oxygen-breathing, sun-needing organisms that require all the elements we have on our planet. But if the conditions are right, any planet with any kind of liquid or atmosphere or chemical compound can really actually create life. There's potential for silicone-based life forms. There's potential for you know, life forms that may even float through space, hydrogen-based life forms. The potential is absolutely amazing. And this is one of the greatest things about science, is that we're constantly discovering, we're constantly finding new ways and new avenues to just to explore and to discover. This on the top right here, these are 3 galaxies in a magical dance here. Our galaxy is actually projected to run into and have a crash course into Andromeda. Andromeda is a neighboring galaxy that is much larger in size and potentially will swallow up the Milky Way. So, you know, looking into technically the past, a lot of these photos are from billions of light years away. Light has a certain speed, so that means that these events that we're picturing now or seeing now happened billions of years ago. It's pretty cool. But this dance of galaxies just kind of shows you how large and how small life and just science can be on a certain scale. You know, our sciences here can look at microscopic objects like a water bear or tardigrade that lives within our moss and eats little tiny particles and can survive the vacuum of space. They're pretty cool. But it can also encompass an astronomical amount of size and time and space. It's really, really cool. So there's so many avenues of science that you can get into, and I highly recommend you look into what it is that you love, because whatever you love, whether it be clothing, food, caring for pets or your animals, or even mowing the grass in your backyard, that all has to do with science. And lastly, this is a close nebula within our system, and it shows you how stars are born. This is basically a cloud, a star-forming cloud full of hot, tumultuous gases. And over time, they start to form. And as gases come together, they develop mass. And the larger the mass they get, the more gravity they have and more gravitational pull they create, which brings in more gases and more. This is exactly how our star was formed billions and billions of years ago. So it's really cool to think about. You know, we have a lot of issues on our planet, but in reality and in a time scale of things, we are so minuscule to everything else that is happening within our universe. And the more we can take care of our planet now, the more we can you know, provide science and information for a better lasting future, the more we're going to get to explore this amazing backyard of ours. Pretty cool. So thank you guys for having me today. Appreciate your attention. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. You can ask me in the chat if you feel like it. Harvey did post my Instagram on there. This is my Nature Nerd Expeditions Instagram. If you guys are on social media, I'm also on Facebook there as well. But I usually post a lot of my own photography, all but the James Webb telescopes and the Jetstream picture were all my photos. So if you guys are interested, I post a lot of my photos and little nature kind of facts about them. So please check out Instagram. Feel free to answer, you know, ask any questions on there too if you need to in the future, or any questions or help getting into the science fields. So if you guys have any questions, we can open that up now.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
You said it's important to have a scientific mind. What qualities or characteristics, like what are the qualities and characteristics of a scientific mind?
Well, I would say first is observation. The scientific process is a pretty simple but important process. You first want to observe things, the world around you, an item in front of you. Great example would be this pen. Make questions about your observations. The pen, why is it shaped like this? Why does it have this little finger hold here, or how does it work? Then you want to create and test your questions, which then create avenues for experiments. Once you test your experiments, you can then create hypotheses that potentially are educated guesses, knowing a little bit more about your interest or whatever the scientific field is, and then doing more experiments to get your final your answers and your data. Just having a scientific mind is really thinking within the scientific process on a daily basis. Thinking about when you go to the store. This is a great example as well. When you look at, say, food prices or what cereal you want to buy, kind of understanding, thinking to yourself, well, how was that wheat grown? Where was it potentially grown? How is this business getting its energy? So especially this is kind of why local food is great, seasonal food, because you're really thinking and adding in the transportation costs, the pollution that comes from that, or the input of pesticides and fertilizers. So just opening your mind to, how things work and how they affect your daily life and the planet around us is really kind of what I mean by having a scientific mind. Especially when I had mentioned scientific minds in politics, that really includes, putting science above all else. Especially working in private sectors, you're often going to be asked to do things that may go against your morals or that are strictly going to make the company more money potentially. Just knowing exactly how that's working, how those factors play into, how you feel about it or the potential outcome of the project is all important. Yeah.
Will we get access to the slides?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I sent a PDF of them.
Yeah.
If
you want, just share me your email.
Yeah, if you guys want access to the slides.
Oh, you did through the survey?
Okay. We can get you access to the slides too, if you want. Absolutely. And yes, Samantha, there is a QR code.
I'll share it right now.
Yeah, Harvey's going to share that right now. And we can also share the link to the PowerPoint too, if you guys are interested. And again, too, if anyone wants any references or internet sites to check, I know of a lot of good potential field job sites or, companies to kind of get some more information from or nonprofits. So, in the future, if you have that and have those questions, just let me know. Yeah.
How does it work for like working abroad?
Working abroad, it's a good question. It depends on who you work for, what you're doing. I know with my studies in Mexico, it was technically a class, but it was a contracted class. So we had to pay for our flight and basically way down to Mexico. That included a flight to Tucson and then a bus across the border down to Navajoa. And then our bosses picked us up from there. But oftentimes working for the private sector, like a company, or even a university that has the funding for it, they'll pay for your way there as well. But that was kind of the one issue that I found with my field jobs is a lot didn't really pay for your way to and from there. So often you were making enough to live and then maybe enough to get back to wherever you were staying for the off season. So, you know, you kind of have to plan ahead for that and do some research and ask questions. You know, is travel going to be compensated, or, you know, is gas? Some companies will do gas as well, so they'll pay you like gas per mile, but you won't see that money until maybe 2 weeks after you take the trip. So it just depends, but yeah, normally, you know, the better funded projects are going to be more beneficial for you in that sense. And with that too, you know, if you are trying to study abroad, I highly recommend, you know, looking into getting your passport if you don't have it, or getting your vaccination updates. I know going to Mexico, I was required to get certain vaccinations before going over there. If you go to Africa or any other kind of equator countries where often like malaria or other viruses are pretty prone, you will need to go to a doctor's visit usually beforehand too.
And this career provides the opportunity to balance time between work and family.
Yeah, it can and it can't. It very, you know, since sciences range so widely, it can be a great balance, especially working in the private sector. You are often have a set schedule and you're home every single night or home during the day. But, you know, with field research, I was often camping, you know, for a month to 4 or 5 months at a time away from family and friends in the middle of nowhere. So depending on, you know, what you're comfortable with, whether you want that family life balance or you want to just go full into your job, that will really kind of depend on what sciences and what specific jobs you want to get within those sciences. But yeah, a lot of them do. A lot of them are great for, you know, just raising a family or having, you know, kids and, you know, family to go home to. Others, probably not so great. You know, yeah, be a lot like traveling in a band or something, or working for, you know, a professional sports agency. You'll be gone for months at a time and then you get a couple months off. So, you know, depending on your preference, but yeah, it goes both ways. It does. All right. Any other questions or concerns or comments? What are we doing on time?
We got 4 minutes left.
Whoa! Timed that perfectly. Love it. Okay.
If you could do it again.
Okay.
If you were in high school, what would you do different?
Oh, great question. You know, my high school didn't really offer a whole lot as far as sciences and biological, or at least life sciences go. But I will say, you know, especially if you do want to go into college, studying for your SATs is important. That oftentimes, sadly, it's kind of how the world works now, but getting a good SAT score can really help you get into some much better schools. Granted, you don't need it for certain universities or colleges, especially if you're getting into like community college or want to do a local state college, but it's really going to help you, especially if you want to travel abroad for school and for potential job opportunities. Definitely, you know, look into the ACT, SAT tests, because that was something I really didn't prep for, I think, enough in high school that I feel like I should have. Because it really encompasses all math, writing, all kinds of stuff. Do you have another question?
No.
No, okay. The other thing I would say too is, you know, I didn't really have time. I was playing a lot of sports in high school, and that kind of was a big time suck for most of my high school career. So, you know, if you do have time for it, I highly recommend joining a club. Very similar to what Adrian's doing over there, you know, join a club or join a group, even on social media, where you can kind of talk and, you know, learn about each other and learn about each other's interests and talk about current up-to-date stuff or, you know, potential, you know, new discoveries in the future. That's a great avenue to kind of meet, you know, science-minded people as well. And like I said, potentially meet, you know, new employers, or create opportunities for you in the future. All right. Any other questions? No?
Are there any more questions? Anybody in the chat? Somewhere?
No. Seems like we're good. So thank you guys again for having me today. If you do get the chance, come visit me out at Jackson Bottom Wetlands. I do all the adult programming and teenage programming out there. So, you know, feel free. It's always free to come visit, free to walk around. You know, even if you're just looking for a place to kind of immerse yourself in nature, it's a great place to do so. Highly recommend, and it's close to town. So hopefully get to chat and communicate with you guys in the future, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yep.
And